Hi, Robert. This is Vincent from Paranormal Conviction. How are you today?
I'm great. The rest of the world, maybe not so much.
Well, you know what? As long as you're good and I'm feeling pretty good today, we'll take it as it comes. But I want to thank you so
Okay.
much for reaching out to me so we can share with the audience, your paranormal experiences. So the first question I have for you today is, what can you say, or what would you say, changed your perception of reality from, okay, normal, average, every day, whatever, to, wow, there's something else out there for sure? Could you tell us what that might have been, and also how old you were when you experienced that?
Well, the triggering event was actually the TV series Twin Peaks, which I think came out about 1989 or 1990. So I would have been about 40 years old then.
Okay.
And I just became kind of obsessed with the imagery and the dreams, and this seemed to kind of trigger something in me. I just suddenly became interested in metaphors and synchronicity, and it just was like a turning point in my life.
So would you say that the first 40 years, that's 40 years of your life, you either had no interest in the paranormal, didn't follow it, it was just something in passing, and then when this thing did happen, once again, it was significant, but you were 40 years old at that point? Nothing before that?
Well, actually, when I was in college, I had a part-time job with a little hole-in-the-wall magazine called Cosmos. No relation to Cosmopolitan or Cosmos, the TV series. And it was into spirituality and paranormal things. And I was kind of the production manager on this small publication. But for the most part, I thought the articles were just humbug, and I didn't really give it much serious attention.
Gotcha. But the triggering experience was related to the show, and when you were 40. Okay, can you tell us what that was? What happened?
Well, I decided I had figured out the show. To me, it was a kind of environmental, kind of an eco-terrorism story, in that the lumber mill, which was like the central industry in the town, had destroyed the forest in which the spirits of the Native Americans lived. And so in revenge, these dispossessed spirits were possessing people in the town and forcing them to do bad things. And so they were also like occupying the wooden structures, like the all-wooden lodge, and one of them was in the log of the log lady. And there were also elements of the dreams that seemed to be related to Native Americans, in that I think there was a lot of dancing in the dreams, and Indians used dancing to summon spirits. And there was I think a little man, and like a big man in the dreams, and a lot of Native American names had like little and big in them. And so there seemed to be a connection. As it turned out, apparently, whoever was producing the show didn't have that intention. So it became like a question of, well, maybe this was an unconscious conveyance of a message that even the producer didn't realize they were doing. But that was my interpretation of the show, and that's what kind of got me started on this linking of cultural events as being like related to the real world, or having larger meanings than either the show or a movie or even a piece of music would seem to indicate.
So was there a specific instance of dialogue or something visual within the show that triggered something in you?
Well, other than the dream sequences, I don't really remember the dream sequences and a bit about people dancing in the dreams or even dancing in real life. Those just seem to be the things that seem to kind of draw out my interest in these spiritual interpretation of things.
And these were dream sequences within the show.
Yeah, within the show.
And so, what did they say to you? What did they mean to you? You know, were you just looking at these things and thought like, oh wow, something makes sense here?
Yeah, well, like I said, I was seeing an interpretation, kind of like an eco-terrorism interpretation that the show's creators apparently didn't see, or they didn't intentionally put in. But this whole thing then just kind of started to make me aware to other things, and then that's when the Falcon synchronicities seemed to also kick in about the same time. So I know that might be a whole different subject, but yeah. And then I had the interview with the Army intelligence officer, which led to a whole different train of events. And
what was that about? Why would the Army intelligence officer want to interview you?
Well, in the early 1990, or was it 91? We were involved in our first war in Iraq, and Hussein had invaded Kuwait, and it was kind of interesting to imagine what the underdog him would do in this case. And I'd come up with the idea that he had built a crude nuclear reactor inside Kuwait, and if forced to retreat, he would let the thing melt down and contaminate the oil fields. And so I called Army intelligence in Washington, D.C. at Fort Meade and gave him the idea over the phone, and didn't think much of it. And then 2 days later, an Army intelligence officer called me and said he wanted to interview me at my job. So he came by and said, they sound like the sort of things Hussein would do, and did I get my information from classified documents? And I said no. And so that propelled me. I decided to take that negative idea and develop it into a screenplay, and then later a novel, although neither went anywhere. So although I've been kind of working a little bit on the novel still, but yeah.
Gotcha. So they contacted you, that they came back to you, and how is that in any way or in every way connected with the triggering event that you had during that TV show Twin Peaks? Was it around that same time? And after this triggering event happened, do you find that any of these paranormal experiences that you've had intensified, went away, stayed about the same?
Well, they intensified. I started having all these Falcon coincidences, and I guess it kind of stayed with me at kind of a Midland level, for the last several years. And every few weeks or months, I would have some idea, that would lead to my writing a little essay, and I'd make various attempts to do some sort of e-publishing or whatever, and nothing seemed to really fly. And so I would just go with the websites, or I would post comments on various forums, and so this activity has been kind of at a low level for several years, and I don't know if I have a cult following or not, but some of the posts on some forums have gotten 4,000 or 5,000 views, so that's something.
Yeah, absolutely. It shows that there's interest at the very least, and that there is something to this at the very most. So when this trigger happened for you at that time, when you were age 40, what did it do to your perception of reality?
I had been up to that time an atheist, so I became aware that there was spiritual forces at work, although, whether it was God or something other than God, I wasn't sure. So I was no longer dismissive, of spiritual beliefs.
Like in the blink of an eye?
You know, I didn't rejoin any organized religion. I had been a Catholic and I'd given that up, but I just became more interested in spiritual things. I bought and read Shirley MacLaine's book. What was that? Going Within.
Okay.
And I'd become interested in that book because I had read she had interviewed Stephen Hawking. And Hawking, the word Hawking is a synonym for falcons. So I thought, okay, well, I'll look into it. So on a trip to visit my mother in Buena Park, I stopped at a bookstore, and there was a stack of her books there. And I opened it randomly, and on the right page, there was a reference to the Tao of Physics, a book I just finished reading. And on the left page, there was a story about a seance in which they contacted a man who had a peregrine falcon. And I thought, wow. So I bought the book, naturally. So I was like, it was another one of those falcon coincidences that was following me around.
When would you say that the falcon, let's just say metaphor or signal, whatever it is for you, when did that start?
Well, that again was about 1990.
About the same time?
Yeah, but it apparently related to things very early in my life, because my first car I owned was a Ford Falcon, which I bought in like 1968. So apparently there were things in the synchronicity that dated back to my younger life.
Do you see them real falcons, the actual, bird, or is it also just, names and, symbols?
Well, I imagine, it's kind of hard to tell. I mean, sometimes I'll look up and see a bird in the sky and wonder if it's a falcon or not. But, no, I haven't had any really close-up experiences with actual falcons. It's been things in the media or seeing Ford Falcons in the street, or the first house I bought, and this was before I had the Falcon connections or realized it was on Peregrine Way in Vacaville. And only after I bought it, I gave it some thought. I thought, well, wait a minute, the first car the owner of this house had been a black man. And when I bought the Ford Falcon, it was from a black man at a used car dealer. So there was like another connection. So.
And what does the word falcon mean to you?
Well, when I did some research, I discovered that the falcon is a icon for the Egyptian sun god Ra. And so I was thinking, well, maybe I have some sort of incarnation of Ra inside me, or some kind of connection with that.
Or maybe your energy existed at that same time when Ra existed. Or
I was thinking, well, maybe I'm a reincarnation of a pharaoh or something. But
right, or something associated with Ra.
Yeah, with something with Ra.
Gotcha. No, that's very interesting. And let me just jump back for a second. So I'm just curious to know that if something happens to a person in their life which makes them recognize the paranormal, does it change them in any way? And if so, how significantly? Extremely? Not so much? I'm wondering, and is it an eye-opener? Is it like a veil has been lifted? Is it like a weight has been taken off you or added to you?
Well, more like added to me.
And I've heard that. It's somewhat of a burden, or can be a burden.
Well, when it first happened, I thought, wow, this means, I thought all this synchronicity was a good sign that my efforts to in my creative field were going to be successful. And this did not turn out to be, it did not turn out to be true at all.
Well, you know what? It's not over, and it's all got to add up to something.
Yeah, I would think so. But, yeah, it's sort of like, I keep thinking, not to sound too egotistical, but I keep wondering, why am I not famous yet?
Right.
And, you know, maybe there's some aspect of this that is supposed to be humbling, and that it's like, maybe when I become famous, it'll be like the last week of my life, and, you know, I'll have
The last 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So besides the Falcon, do you have any other synchronicities that are just consistent, blatant?
No, I mean, there are synchronicities I observe in various things, but they're not directly related to me. They're like related to the world at large. I just keep seeing patterns of things that repeat themselves. Like, we remember, like, Yoko Ono being responsible for the breakup of the Beatles, or at least some dissension of the Beatles, and she took John Lennon to America. And I could see that being kind of being repeated with Meghan Markle. She was kind of a disruptive force with the royals, and she took her mate to America. So it was like history was repeating itself. If you could see that pattern.
Right. No, I'm looking at it. Well, I mean, they both from England or whatever. Obviously, they do different things, and yeah, and I could see that.
And you know, Yoko Ono was a member of a minority, and there was some controversy over that. And Meghan Markle was also, you know, part black, and that was also causing some controversy.
So if there is some connection between those two, what could it possibly mean?
I kind of think of it as kind of quantum history. You may have heard the expression of spooky action over distance, where something in a physics lab, a particle interaction, is repeated at the same time at a faraway distance. And this might be a case of kind of a quantum history where something is repeated over a distance, or over both space and time. I don't know the exact reason.
So like non-locality?
Yeah, and it's not exactly, of course, exactly the same, but it has all these similarities. I don't know if that means that history is like a script that's already written, and you just have these patterns that repeat, or, you know.
Or maybe they just keep repeating until we get it right.
That's another idea, yes. Very true, yes.
Right, gotcha.
It's like that episode of Star Trek where they're caught in a time loop, and they keep going over and over again until they figure out how to stop the time loop.
Right.
And set things right.
Right. It's exactly. It's a metaphor for getting it right, learning, and moving on, but learn.
Right.
Yeah, no, that's real interesting, Robert. And so I just jump back again. So would you say that recognition of the paranormal, you were saying kind of like a burden, because why? Like, okay, what do I do with this now? What does this mean?
Well, it was a burden that for one thing, it helped me lose my job because I became obsessed with this thing, and I wasn't paying full attention to this stuff at work. So, and I was thinking, well, I'm going to become this huge author, and it doesn't matter. Oh, God. But I did get another job after that, so, you know, no biggie.
But you continued on the same path. In other words, the interest in the paranormal didn't die because you lost your job. You continued with it.
I just try to take a little more measured tone in terms of anticipating how this is going to help me.
Yeah. Gotcha.
It was more or less signposts, but the signposts weren't necessarily leading me to, you know, fame and fortune.
Gotcha.
It was leading me down a path, and I would just have to follow it and see where it took me.
Gotcha. And then, so I was looking at your website, and I saw that under one of the posts there, it said that you are a seer. Could you explain to us what that is?
Well, some of my stuff seems to kind of predict the future. Some things, you know, like I would have a dream, and then, or there would be events in my life that were like on a micro level, but they seem to be repeated at a macro level in the real world. So, in that sense. And as I mentioned, I seem to have predicted 9/11 in my interpretation of the movie Independence Day in its relation to alien abduction. But, and also I seem to be suggesting that there is some predictive power in this idea of the cycle of Ra, and that there seems to be a repetition in history that follows the Ra Trinity of Capri in the morning, Ra at noon, and Atum in the evening. It seems to be a historical pattern that seems to be repeated itself through history.
I would say a seer, or what I would think a seer would be someone who either on purpose or maybe not on purpose, inadvertently, can predict the future, has synchronicities that pop up again in the future, something, or possibly even in the past, maybe seeing something in the past and then later on finding out, oh wow, that did happen. Would I be correct in saying a seer is something along those lines?
Yeah, although I would say seer is probably more like on a third priority of things that I'm interested in. I'm not, predicting some things about the future, or at least future trends, is one thing, but it's actually not the highest level. It's more interpreting current events, or more interpreting things in the Egyptian cycle that is perhaps even more important to me than the seer aspect.
Okay.
But there's just a whole bunch of things that I'm involved in. It's my plate is pretty full in terms of, as you can tell from the variety of things I talk about.
Right, exactly. All right, so let me just jump into a topic then real quick. We spoke a little bit earlier, and tell me about your theory as to what the gray aliens are, and with respect to when they abduct people.
Okay. Well, the crucial year here, in terms of my understanding, was 1996. And I don't exactly remember how I got on this subject, but, I noticed that these aliens, or these beings, they were hairless, they had these small bodies and these kind of underdeveloped limbs and these large heads, and frankly, it looked like a fetus, except with some little slight alien variations, and it seemed so obvious to me.
You saw a picture of this?
Well, I'd seen, images of these grays in various publications or whatever.
In pop culture?
And I'd also run across an image somebody had done of a alien fetus, which actually looks pretty much like an alien adult. So it was like the fetus and adult were really the same thing. And then when I was, I think, in a grocery store, I ran across this magazine called UFO Sightings. And there was an author in there, Matt Graber, who also noticed this similarity between the aliens and the human fetus. And he noticed that many of the people who had been these female abductees had reported they had suffered the loss of a child through either miscarriage or an abortion. And so he interpreted the alien abduction as being kind of a result of a psychological trauma caused by the loss of the child or the abortion. So, he saw it as a psychological effect, but I interpreted more as a genuine spiritual event or a supernatural event. And then the next, I'd also noticed along the way, I had seen this movie, Fire in the Sky. I don't know if you're familiar
Travis
with that.
Walton.
Yeah, 1993 movie.
Yeah, D.B. Sweeney.
There's a scene in that in which he is abducted, and it's like he's inside of this spaceship, it's like almost he's in like in a fetus. He breaks out of what seems like a placenta-like casing, and then he floats in this womb-like cavern while he's holding on to what appears to be an umbilical cord. So it seemed to have all these references to, a fetal condition. And then finally, I went to see that movie, Independence Day. And one thing I had noticed in all these discussions about alien abductions is that they seem to have tapered off by the mid-90s. It was like this message that, hey, we're the ghost of aborted fetuses, and we've come back to haunt you and torment you. It was like, okay, this isn't working. We're going to go on to something else. And to me, this movie Independence Day represented what that other else was. These aborted fetuses were coming back, and they were going to cause havoc. These spaceships were like motherships, only they were motherships of death. They were pregnant with death instead of being pregnant with life. Instead of dilate fire breaks, instead of dilate water breaks, it was dilate fire breaks, and you would have this, destruction coming down on these skyscrapers. And so I became kind of obsessed with this idea that this was a warning. And, I had some background in business communication and writing newsletters and press releases, so I sent out a press release to the media, and I don't know why, but I was connecting it to the Bob Dole campaign and saying he should warn people that we're in danger from abortions, and we would face this destruction from the heavens if something wasn't done about abortion. And of course, years later, at 9/11, people were kind of comparing that with Independence Day. The destruction of the skyscrapers and whatever. And eventually, I went back one day back to my filing cabinet and was going through some stuff, and I ran across the original press release I sent out, and the date on it was September 11th, 1996. So that was exactly 5 years before 9/11. And I remember after discovering this, went to a local pastor. I'd gone to church there a couple of times. And I showed him, I gave him this press release, and I thought he would do something with it. But apparently he was all bound up in some sort of financial problems with the church, and he never, looked at it. And several years later, I, showed him the press release again, and he said, "Oh yes, sorry, I didn't have time to look at it." And I thought, okay, well now he has it, and he'll do something with it. He'll tell his congregation, or maybe other ministers, and point out this warning about abortion, because I knew he was conservative and was pro-life, but no, he didn't do anything with it. And so
another thing that just disappears into the ether.
Yeah, it's like I felt like I was in that TV show Westworld. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
I'm familiar with the movie with Yul Brynner, not the TV show.
Yeah, no, in the show, it's much more sophisticated. But every time the robot, one of these robots, would see something that conflicted with their perspective of what was going on in the world, their program perspective, they would say, "Doesn't look like anything to me." And that became kind of like the words that I felt like I was encountering with some of the things I would tell people. It was like, oh, very interesting, but doesn't really look like anything to me. So,
Well, let me ask you something about this. This thought that you got about the aborted fetuses coming back. If they are coming back to give us a message, whatever the message is, who's sending them and why?
Well, presumably they're coming from the afterlife.
Right, but who's sending? If they're coming back for a purpose, who's sending them? Who's giving them the mission?
Well, I supposedly God, but whatever community exists on the other side, have sent them over. I think people will think, hey, why don't you just and say abortion is bad? Why all this amorphous metaphors? And I don't know. I don't know why spiritual language has to be in metaphors and symbolism.
Do you think it's ever straightforward?
Huh?
Do you think it's ever straightforward?
I guess not, and I don't know. Yeah, it's. I remember this episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they went to this world and they couldn't understand their language. They were just baffled, and they went through all kinds of conflicts and very, very dangerous situations, and they finally figured out that these people spoke entirely in metaphors, and then they were able to communicate with them.
Oh, I hope they did some good metaphors on the show. That's great. That's a good idea.
Yeah,
but that was it. That was just how they communicated. It was just in metaphors.
Yeah, they communicated entirely through metaphors.
Right.
So, I don't know why the communication between spirits and the material world has to be this metaphorical thing, but apparently that's the way it is.
It's a serious communication breakdown. Okay. No problem.
Thank you for calling me, and I'm glad we were able to discuss so many things.
Well, listen, Robert, thank you so much. I'm very happy to have you on the show.
Okay.
I would love to pick your brain some more, and I would really appreciate it.
Okay, fine.
All right then, Robert. Thank you. Bye-bye. All right, and once again, I'd like to thank Robert for being a guest on the podcast. Robert's last name is pronounced Urbanek, and it's spelled Urbanek. He grew up in Southern California and earned a BA in journalism from California State University, Long Beach in 1973. He has more than 2 decades of experience as a writer and editor for community newspapers and medical and legal-related publications, which included several years each with the National Notary Association, the Doctors Company, and CCH Incorporated. And if you'd like to check out some of his work, you can go to his website at www.roberts, as in Sam, Urbanek.com. Once again, that's www.robertsurbanek.com. And I'd like to thank you all for being a part of this episode, and we'll see you next time.